The difference between 0.5% and 0.05% may not feel like a lot, but it can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference in retirement. We're not exaggerating. That is how much small differences in fees add up to. In today's episode, we'll explain how you can avoid overpaying and ensure the money stays in your pocket. Welcome to Get Started Investing, a show where we help you make the most of your money. My name's Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. We hate fees here at Equity Mates. It is one of our official policies. Pop quiz for you. We have 3 official policies. Do you remember the other 2?
Yes, we hate fees. We hate jargon, and we hate paperwork.
We hate paperwork, yes.
Thank you to the ASX and Chess for paperwork.
Yes, thank you ironically.
Yes, thank you ironically.
So why do we hate fees? Let's start there, because this episode's all about the cheapest ETFs. It isn't always about getting the cheapest option, but just as a general point, why do we hate fees? Because they're one of the few things that you can control in investing. The future is uncertain. The market is uncertain. The important thing as an investor is to control what you can control. And there's a few elements to that, like control your portfolio construction, be diversified, and then importantly, control how much you pay. Lower your brokerage, lower your fees, keep the money in your pocket.
There has never been, I guess, a champion of paying low fees more than our good friend Warren Buffett.
Well, because he doesn't charge fees.
He doesn't charge fees, exactly. He doesn't charge fees, and it can add up to millions of dollars. And we have an example here that we always turn to, which just is phenomenal to show the difference in fees. So if you'd invested $1,000 in Berkshire Hathaway in 1965, by 2022, you'd have $38 million. Nice. Firstly, that's awesome. Now, if Buffett did decide to charge fees, and if he charged 1% management fee, that would become $35 million. If he charged 2% in management fees, that $38 million becomes $12 million. And if he charged what is the traditional fee structure of 2% and then 20% on all performance, you would have $8.6 million. That is wild. Turning 38 million into 8.6 million just goes to show that small differences in fees can make huge difference to your long-term returns.
Yeah. People who are listening to this or watching this might be thinking 1%, 2%, those fees seem really high. And that is a function of just how much the investing world has changed over the past 10 years. Because now with low-cost ETFs, we expect our fees to have a 0 at the front of it.
Absolutely.
But we should recognize that just how new that is and how good that is. Even when you're talking about fees with a 0 at the front of it, those differences can really add up. So we use the Money Smart compound interest calculator. There is another calculator that is a managed funds fee calculator, which is pretty useful to sort of illustrate the effective fees on your returns. So we'll include a link in the show notes, but we said $1,000 a month invested for 30 years. Working life with the same return, 10% return, 0.5% fees, you get $1.87 million.
Nice. I'm not going to say no to that.
That's great.
I'm not going to say no to that.
And that's a reminder that if you try and get rich slow and you just take a market return over your life, you can become a millionaire.
You can literally invest your way to a millionaire.
So $1.87 million, you wouldn't be upset with that.
No.
That's 0.5%. If you go 0.05%, $2.06 million.
So an extra 200 grand.
$200,000 difference between 0.5% and 0.05%. So again, when you're looking at like your superannuation account or you're comparing ETFs, you might think they're both really low. And they are both really low. But there are degrees to this, and those degrees add up over time.
Now, we should say, Ren, that there is a caveat here, and that it's to remember that fees are really only half the equation. Don't just go hunting fees. After fee return is also very important. What that means is once you've paid the fees, you still want to be in a product that is actually performing well.
It's like high fees can be justified if the returns are high as well.
Exactly. So we'll provide an example at the end of this episode to illustrate that a little bit further. However,
I think it's like we hate fees when there is an equivalent
return.
product. No. We hate fees when there is a cheaper equivalent product.
That performs just as well.
Well, if it's an equivalent product, that's implied. Yeah.
So we are going to look at the lowest cost ETFs here in Australia. All of the data is from Morningstar's ETF list. We will provide a link in the show notes to that so that you can verify it yourselves and you don't come at us in the comments for missing it. Because I can guarantee that's going to happen.
All complaints go to Morningstar.
All complaints go to Morningstar.
So what we've tried to do here, again, because you want to be comparing apples to apples.
Absolutely.
It's kind of unfair to say, all right, we're going to compare the Vanguard Australian Shares ETF with the BetaShares Cybersecurity ETF because they're doing different things.
Yeah.
So what we've really focused on here is 3 categories: Australian ETFs, American S&P 500 ETFs, and then global shares ETFs. Then we've also got a dishonorable mentions section, which we'll save to the end. And we've got a top 3 for each of them, the 3 cheapest in each of those categories.
Yeah. And again, we know that some of them, VAS versus A200 is not exact comparable because VAS is top 300 versus 200.
They're like
but
Australian.
It's very similar.
I think it's fine. They're in the same category.
I'm just keeping the comments away.
Australian index shares, I think, is fine to categorize together.
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Okay, so for Australian shares ETFs, coming in at number 3 is the Vanguard Australian Shares ETF, VAS, 0.07%.
Yep.
Coming in at number 2, we have a 3-way We've got the iShares Core S&P ASX 200 ETF, 0.05%, and that is equal with 2 from State Street, the SPDR ASX 200 ETF, and the SPDR ASX 200 ESG ETF, STW and E200. They both are also 0.05%. Coming in at number 1, the cheapest Australian shares exposure you can get here in Australia, probably you can get around the world, to be honest, the BetaShares Australia 200 ETF, A200, 0.04%.
Now, just to illustrate, for those that have just joined, that means if you're putting in $1,000 a year, you're paying 40 cents for access to that ETF. Incredibly low cost. Incredibly low cost.
Now look, 0.04% compared to 0.07% may not feel like a lot, but I've just put it in the managed fee funds calculator. I've said $1,000 a month, 30 years, 10% per year, 0.04% versus 0.07% works out to be 2.049
million.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then 2.062 million.
Okay.
So you're getting an extra $13,000
for nothing.
For nothing.
Free 13 grand. Wouldn't say no to that. All right. The next category we have, Ren, of the US ETFs listed here in Australia. Coming in at number 3 is SPY, SPDR S&P 500 ETF, 0.09%. Then we've got iShares, S&P 500, ticker is IVV, coming in at 0.04%. And then coming in at number 1, very popular, VTS, Vanguard US Total Market Shares ETF, coming in at 0.03%. So again, 30 cents for every $1,000 that you are investing across the year. Incredibly cheap. Incredibly cheap. Now, Ren, you're plugging away the numbers.
I am. So the difference over 30 years using those same assumptions as before, $26,000.
There you go. If you have a core portfolio of VTS and then A200, you're saving yourself almost 40 grand there.
Yeah. Well, if you're investing the same amount in it,
Both.
I think the point we're trying to illustrate is these are our list of the cheapest of the cheapest.
Yeah.
Like these are all great ETFs that have brought costs way down. But even in like the small basis points differences, they still can compound into meaningful amounts over time. And so, SPY came in at 3rd. If we did that same calculation with the ETF that came in at 5th or 10th that gave you the same exposure, then obviously it's even more. So, look, I know over 30 years you might think $26,000. No, actually, screw that. Why am I caveating it? $26,000 is $26,000. Yeah. Keep it in your pocket.
Exactly. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we're going to look at the global shares, ETFs, and then have a look at some of, I guess, the more dishonorable mentions that are on the higher side of the ETFs here in Australia. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Started Investing. We're looking at some of the cheapest ETFs here in Australia and why small differences can make a huge difference to your long-term returns. Ren, let's take a look at some of the global shares ETFs. We've got 3 again. We'll start with number 3, iShares Core MSCI ex-Australia ESG. The ticker is IWLD, 0.09%. Coming in at number 2 is the BetaShares Global Shares ETF BGBL, 0.08%. And number 1 is Vanguard's All World ex-US Shares, 0.04%. The ticker there is VEU. Again, all great ETFs, all very cheap, give you global index investing opportunities.
Yeah, so if we just pause here and we say, all right, those are the 3 categories we decided to group them in. If we were going to hand out across categories, gold, silver, and bronze, well, then the cheapest ETF in Australia across any category goes to the Vanguard US Total Markets Shares ETF at 0.03% VTS. And then in equal second, we've got the Vanguard All World ex-US Shares ETF, 0.04%, alongside the BetaShares Australia 200 ETF. And then coming in bronze, we've got 3 Australian ETFs, IOZ, STW, and E200. I couldn't be bothered to read out their full names.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Coming in at 0.05%. So there's so many great, cheap ETFs listed here in Australia. So those are our podium finishers. But Bryce, you teased before the break that we're going to talk about some dishonorable mentions. And I think we're not just here to name and shame, because I think looking at the top 3 highest fee ETFs in Australia, that I think there's a point to be made.
Yep.
Now, a caveat. The fees that we're using here are from the Morningstar ETF list. The challenge when looking at high fee ETFs, the actively managed ETFs, is they often have a management fee and a performance fee. What Morningstar do is blend the two to give it just a 1% to try and do an apples to apples comparison. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the fee that we say versus the fee that you'll see on the issuer's website.
Nice.
The issuer will split it into 2.
Yeah. So the examples we have here are all actively managed ETFs, often where you'll find a higher management fee because they would say that there's more work and effort going into them.
Well, there is.
And they're actively picking stocks, whereas your traditional index, there's none of that. It just follows a rule-based method. So we have 4 that we're going to go through, which are the top 3 most expensive ETFs here in Australia. Coming in equal number at number 3 is the L1 Capital International Hedged Active ETF, 2.55%, along with the Loftus Peak Global Disruption Managed Fund ETF, 2.55%. So that's equal 3. Coming in at number 2 is the Lakehouse Global Growth Active ETF, ticker LHGG, at 2.59%. And coming in at number 1 is the K2 Australian Small Cap ETF, ticker is KSM, coming in at 3.95%.
Nuts.
So I guess, again, to use our $1,000 example, that's investing $1,000, you're paying $39.50 in fees compared to what we were paying before, 30 or 40 cents.
Yeah.
Now, we're not comparing the two because they have completely different strategies, but just to give you the numbers.
Now, to illustrate what I was saying earlier about Morningstar blending the fees, I had a look at the K2 ETF on their website. Their fee structure is 1.31% management and then a 15.38% performance once the fund exceeds their benchmark.
Watermark, yeah. Oh.
But Morningstar blend those together based on recent performance, and that's how they get that fee load. Now, we said there was a point to this. We're not just naming and shaming, but earlier we said after fee performance is what matters.
Yep.
It's worth paying fees if you're going to get excess returns.
Yep.
So we had a look at the returns for these funds. Again, Morningstar lists them all out. Some of them are newer than others. L1 Capital's only been around for a bit over a year. So over a year, they've delivered 10%. Probably not really outpacing the index by that much. No. But let's look at the other 3 where we've got 5 years worth of data. So K2, the most expensive ETF in Australia, over the last 5 years, annually has averaged 4.26%.
And they're a small cap. It's a small cap fund, but yeah, that's pretty pretty low.
Well, that's lower than the index, which you could pay 3 basis points to buy.
Yeah, that's lower. Yeah.
You get nervous about this, don't you?
Well, it's lower than the ASX 200 index.
Lower than the S&P 500 as well.
Yeah, but what's the Australian small cap
Yeah,
index?
Yeah, that is a fair point. Lake House, 7.8%, better, but again, below what you could get from just buying a stock market index.
Yep.
But the point that we want to make about sometimes the active managers earns their fees is Loftus Peak over the past 5 years has delivered 18.4%. Now that has outpaced the index.
Yeah.
So if you're getting 18.4% after fees, then you can say, all right, well, I'm doing better and the fund manager is earning their fees.
Yes, it just goes to show the point that we always make, Ren, is that active managers often find it difficult to beat the index.
Well, I mean, it's not the point we make. It's the point that the global data giant S&P Global tracks and continues to make through their SPIVA scorecard. In Australia, over the past 15 years, 15% of active managers have managed to beat the ASX 200. So if you're finding that cohort, that's great.
Yeah.
What you want to make sure is that they continue to outperform, because we've seen time and time again, active managers have a good run and then they start to underperform. So you got to think about them like an individual stock or a thematic ETF. You got to keep checking on them and you got to make sure they keep delivering. But after fee returns is what matters. And if you're not getting bang for your buck, find a better option.
Well, you're definitely getting bang for your buck in some of these low-cost index ETFs that are now available here in Australia. Very, very cheap access to well-diversified global exposure. You can't go wrong.
I actually thought you were going to go a different direction, so I'm going to go in that direction. You're definitely getting bang for your buck with Get Started Investing because we don't charge you anything.
No.
We're the lowest cost, lowest fee podcast here in Australia. Try and find a cheaper one. You won't be able to do it. So if you enjoy what we do, we would love your support. Subscribing wherever you're watching or listening, but leaving us a rating or a review. And the best thing that you can do for any podcast you love, tell a friend about it. More than a third of new podcast discovery is word of mouth. So please, if you're enjoying this, if you're getting value out of it, tell someone about it, spread the love. But that's it for us, Bryce. We'll be back next episode.
Sounds good.